On the night I planned to propose, he proposed first. Same woman, same ring box, same promises spoken like borrowed thunder. Everyone cheered while I held my speech like useless confetti. My mother clapped, my father toasted, the room devoured oxygen. I said nothing and vowed I'd never need applause again. Caleb kissed Lucy under neon pie signs, stealing my horizon. I tucked the ring deeper, like guilt hiding under floorboards. The diner band stumbled through country songs that didn't spare me. Lucy met my eyes once, then looked anywhere people weren't watching. I paid our tab and drove into the indifferent dark. Back home, I emptied my pockets onto the kitchen table. The speech I'd written felt like a costume after daylight. June bugs tapped glass, sounding like weak knuckles seeking entry. I folded the napkin twice, then dropped it like molasses. My phone filled with photos of their hands braided hopefully. Mom texted, "Fate chooses bravest hearts. Be gracious, sweetheart, tonight." I typed congratulations, then deleted letters until nothing remained inside. Outside, Main Street flickered, pretending small towns keep heartbreak gentle. I placed the ring in a drawer beside loose screws. It clicked shut softly, like advice I couldn't follow yet. Lucy and I once shared coffee behind the body shop. We talked music and the ache of leaving this county. She liked my quiet, said it made rooms feel honest. Then Caleb arrived, smiling like highways promise cities new miracles. He spoke faster, brighter, and my shadows looked outdated suddenly. People choose spectacle when their courage hasn't started breathing yet. He called me loyal. She called him destiny. I disappeared. I told myself losing gracefully would grow something better someday. But grace without truth just dissolves into silence that bruises. That night proved it, and the bruise finally learned speech. The diner smelled like sugar pies and fryer oil confessions. Caleb performed. Lucy glowed. The jukebox pretended nobody bled tonight. He thanked destiny for steering hearts toward absolute alignment tonight. Dad slapped his back like victory needed extra percussion tonight. I counted napkin holders, negotiating panic with stainless reflections fair. My aunt whispered, "Smile bigger, or they'll think you're jealous." Jealousy was there, yes, but smaller than the humiliation tonight. Humiliation grew teeth whenever laughter needed something bright to chew. I held the lemonade pitcher like a firefighter holding line. Nothing spilled except futures I had imagined more carefully before. I parked by the river and listened to stubborn crickets. Water slid past, reminding me survival moves even when paralyzed. A stray dog trotted by, sniffed, then kept her distance. I whispered, "I will not beg happiness from anyone tonight. I will build something steady that no one can steal. I will learn quiet strong enough to balance rooms alone. I will work until envy gets bored and leaves town." That vow tasted like metal, but it kept breathing anyway. I started the engine and followed the dark home slowly. The night didn't answer, but it finally stopped arguing back. Morning brought gossip like junk mail stuffed through every door everywhere. Photos of rings bloomed across feeds like well-watered weeds everywhere. At the garage, co-workers offered jokes wrapped as sympathy today. I tightened bolts until my knuckles learned new alphabets today. Caleb stopped by, grinning, saying, "Destiny writes efficient schedules, brother." I answered, "Take care of her," then returned to work. My boss whispered, "Take tomorrow off. You look underwater, Eli." I nodded, packed tools, and drove County Road 14 west. Fields leaned gold, pretending heartache was part of harvest season. At a pullout, I cried like thunder hiding behind clouds. When I ran out of tears, I counted upcoming paychecks. I counted tools, then counted hours I could borrow tomorrow. I counted friends remaining, then decided work could replace applause. At dusk, I drove to the County Line diner alone. I ordered coffee and pie and practiced breathing slower tonight. An old farmer said, "Storms pass. Strong fences usually remain." I answered, "Then I'll start building, even if alone tomorrow." He nodded like men do when respect finds a table. I paid cash, left tip, and saved my voice tonight. Joy would be built, not begged. That became my blueprint. The cabin walls creaked like old bones learning to breathe again. Mornings came late, and I didn't fight them anymore. The alarm clock had stopped ticking days ago, maybe weeks. Time didn't matter when every sunrise felt like an echo of the same loss. I'd wake to silence so thick it hummed like electricity. Sometimes I'd forget to eat, sometimes I'd drink until the night turned merciful. Work called once, then never again. The men at the shop sent pity texts I didn't answer. My mother left voicemails full of God and guilt, each one softer than the last. Outside, frost covered the fields, white as surrender. I tried to fill days with anything resembling purpose, chopping wood, fixing leaks, sanding the same porch rail twice over. Nothing stuck long enough to silence what kept looping inside. Caleb's laugh, Lucy's hand in his, tiny scenes I'd replay until air felt unbreathable. The pain wasn't sharp anymore, it was dull and loyal. It stayed like a tenant that refused eviction. Nights were worse because they gave space for imagination. I'd picture their home, their dinners, their good mornings that should have been mine. The whiskey bottle became my conversation partner, patient and predictable. They deserve each other, I'd mumble, then hate myself for meaning it. Eventually, I stopped talking altogether. Winter deepened and the cold grew personal. I pawned a few tools for grocery cash and heating oil. Some nights I'd drive nowhere just to feel motion again. The cabin radio caught faint signals. Preachers, love songs, weather, reports promising more gray. I thought about leaving town for good, starting over somewhere no one knew my name. But even that dream felt too ambitious for the man I'd become. I was surviving, not living, and there's a difference you can taste. One night, snow blanketed the road so quietly it looked merciful. I sat on the porch, watching flakes fall on my boots. That was the night I nearly didn't come back inside. It wasn't dramatic. No note, no plan. Just a tired thought that I'd had enough. I poured the last of the whiskey, stared at the frost building on the window, and wondered how long it'd take before someone found me. But then I heard it, a faint whimper, soft and trembling, just outside the door. I opened it, expecting the wind, and found a small brown dog shivering against the steps. She looked like she'd lost faith in the world too. I knelt down, and she didn't flinch, just leaned forward until her head rested against my hand. "Hey girl," I whispered, and for the first time in months my voice didn't sound like a stranger's. She followed me inside without question, settling near the heater like she belonged there. I found an old can of beans, shared half with her, and named her June, because the word itself felt like sunlight. She slept by the door, one paw twitching in her dreams, maybe chasing something better. Watching her breathe reminded me that warmth doesn't need an invitation, it just happens when you let it. I cleaned up the empty bottles that night, one by one. June watched, tail flicking softly, as if she already approved of the new rhythm beginning. I didn't know it yet, but she'd just saved my life. Days found shape again, slow and clumsy but real. Feeding June gave mornings a reason to start. Fixing the leaks meant keeping her dry. I stopped ignoring my mother's messages, though I still couldn't answer them. People at the gas station started nodding again instead of staring. June followed me everywhere, a shadow stitched from loyalty and patience. One afternoon, she limped near the woodpile, paw bleeding from a nail. I panicked like she was human, wrapped her in an old towel, and drove to the vet in town. The sign read, "Cook's Animal Rescue and Clinic." I didn't know that door would change everything. Inside, the place smelled like disinfectant and cedar. Cages lined the walls, some empty, some filled with tired eyes and slow tails. An older man with gray hair and a denim shirt looked up. "She yours?" he asked. "She found me," I said. He smiled like that made perfect sense. "They usually do," he said. "Let's patch her up." He moved gentle, humming under his breath while cleaning her wound. When he finished, he said, "Name's Harlan Cook. I run this shelter. You handy?" I nodded. "Mechanic by trade," I said. He grinned. "Then you're hired, if you can stand the smell." I hesitated, unsure if he was joking. "We pay small," he added, "but you'll sleep better than you have been." Something in his tone cracked the wall I'd built around myself. I shook his hand and said, "I'll be here in the morning." On the drive home, June's bandaged paw rested on my leg. For the first time since the diner, my chest didn't feel hollow. There was still a long way to climb, but at least now there was direction. The road ahead was rough and real, exactly the kind worth walking. The next morning, the sky broke open with a clean, honest blue. I woke earlier than I had in months, nerves buzzing like machinery warming after a long winter. June followed me to the truck, paw still bandaged but tail confident. The road to Harlan's shelter wound past cornfields half asleep under frost. When I pulled in, the place looked like it was holding itself together with willpower, fences leaning, roofs patched, and signs faded to ghosts. Harlan stood by the barn, coffee mug in one hand, hammer in the other. "Didn't think you'd actually show," he said with a grin. I didn't either, I admitted. But here we are. He handed me gloves that had seen better decades. Start with those kennels, he said. We've got more holes than hope. The first nail bent, the second split wood, the third finally stuck. Harlan watched from a distance, humming a tune that sounded like forgiveness. A few dogs barked from the runs, their eyes curious instead of hostile. June stayed near the truck, sniffing everything like a sheriff investigating a crime. By noon, I'd repaired 3 panels and learned the rhythm of the place. Harlan brought sandwiches wrapped in wax paper and said, "Most folks don't last a day here. You might." I took that as high praise. The days started lining up like obedient soldiers. Fix a gate, patch a leak, feed the animals, repeat. Harlan taught me how to mix feed, how to read body language from the broken ones. "They don't need pity," he said one afternoon. "They need purpose, just like us." Those words sank deep, quiet, and permanent. The dogs began trusting me faster than I trusted myself. Each bark sounded like a reminder that something alive depended on me. Nights came softer now, exhaustion replacing despair. June slept curled at my feet, twitching through dreams that probably looked brighter than mine. I still thought about Caleb and Lucy sometimes, but their faces faded like old stains on new wood. People in town noticed I was working again, though not in the way they expected. At the hardware store, an old coworker smirked. "You gone from engines to animals, huh?" he said. "Guess it fits. You always fix strays." I smiled faintly. "Guess that makes 2 of us." He didn't know what to say to that, and I liked the silence better anyway. Every joke thrown my way now rolled off easier, like rain sliding down seasoned timber. Harlan once told me, "The world respects results, not explanations." I lived by that. My hands started to ache, but it was the good kind of pain, the kind that tells you you're building, not breaking. One Friday, a young reporter from the local paper came by. "We're doing a feature on small-town shelters," she said, snapping photos while I worked. "Mind if I ask what brought you here?" I hesitated, nails between my teeth. "Bad timing," I said finally. "Then a second chance." She smiled like she understood without needing the details. The article came out 2 weeks later. "Man repairs more than fences at county shelter." People stopped by with donations, bags of food, blankets, even money. Harlan slapped the paper on the office wall. "You made us look respectable," he said. "Now we've got expectations to meet." For the first time, pride didn't scare me. By spring, the shelter buzzed with new energy. Volunteers came on weekends, helping clean and paint the kennels. I built new feeding stations from scrap metal and old barrels. Harlan started calling me mechanic, like a badge instead of a job. One afternoon he said, "You know, this place'll outlive me someday. Might as well start teaching you how to run it." I laughed, thinking he was joking, but his eyes stayed serious. "People like you don't just show up," he said. "They're sent when places need saving." I didn't know what to say, so I tightened another bolt instead. That's how men like us said thank you. June became the unofficial mascot, greeting visitors at the gate with her crooked grin. Kids adored her, even with the scar on her paw. She'd sit beside me during breaks, head on my boot, both of us watching the wind roll through the tall grass. Some evenings, I'd catch myself smiling without realizing it. That used to feel like betrayal, but now it felt like permission. The pain hadn't vanished. It had just been repurposed, hammered into something solid. I wasn't chasing happiness anymore. I was learning how to build peace, one repair at a time. One night, after closing, Harlan poured 2 glasses of bourbon and handed me one. "You're a different man than the one who showed up here," he said. I looked around at the clean stalls, the steady hum of contentment in the air. "I just finally had something worth fixing," I said. He nodded, clinking his glass against mine. "Sometimes that's all it takes." I drove home that night with the windows down, the wind singing something that sounded almost like forgiveness. The next morning, I woke before sunrise, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. Summer rolled in thick with heat, the kind that stuck to everything it touched. The shelter buzzed with flies and barking, but it felt alive, like something rebuilt from the ashes of its own exhaustion. I'd added new kennels made from repurposed steel and salvaged planks, the kind of work that made my back ache but my soul rest easier. Harlan said I'd turned the place from a rescue into a refuge. "Difference is," he said, "a refuge gives hope somewhere to live." I didn't tell him that I understood that better than anyone. Hope had been living here quietly inside me, clawing its way back into sunlight. June followed me everywhere, her limp barely noticeable now. When she barked, it wasn't fear anymore, it was announcement. We had survived another day. Word about the shelter spread faster than I expected. People drove from neighboring towns, sometimes just to drop off food, other times to adopt. Harlan had me handle most of the repairs and intakes, saying, "You've got patience most men buy with regret." I didn't know if that was a compliment or an observation. One morning, a local carpenter came by with a camera crew. "Doing a story on community heroes," he said, all enthusiasm and sweat. "Folks love a man with a dog and a mission." I almost told him to leave, but Harlan elbowed me. "Let people see what good looks like," he whispered. So I smiled for the photos, even if it felt unnatural, and hoped they'd capture the truth somewhere between my scars and the sunlight. The article hit local news first, then regional. From mechanic to miracle worker, the man who rebuilt a shelter and himself. The title made me cringe, but it brought donations. We bought better insulation, stronger doors, new feed bins. People started calling me the quiet guy from the shelter, like silence had become a brand I didn't need to defend anymore. Even kids at the diner called June by name, slipping her fries when they saw us. I avoided talk of my past, not because I was ashamed, but because the man I used to be didn't fit this story anymore. The mirror showed someone new, steady, sunburned, still scarred, but no longer hiding behind pain. Some nights, I'd stay late after everyone left. The sun would drop behind the tree line, and the world would hum itself to sleep. I'd sit on the porch with June, watching lightning bugs blink across the field. That silence felt like a language I finally understood. Harlan joined me sometimes, sipping coffee that tasted like burnt peace. "You ever miss it?" he asked once. "What?" I said. "Whatever broke you enough to start over." I thought about Caleb, about Lucy, about how their love story once defined my failure. "No," I said softly. "I don't miss what wasn't mine." He nodded. "Good," he said. "That means you're not stuck anymore." The next test came when Harlan got sick. It started as coughs, then fatigue, then hospital visits that stretched too long. He told everyone it was nothing, but the way his hands trembled said otherwise. One evening after closing, he handed me a set of old keys. "For the office," he said, "just in case." "In case of what?" I asked. He smiled faintly. "In case I stop pretending I'm immortal." I wanted to argue, but I'd learned that silence sometimes honors love better than denial. So I took the keys, placed them in my pocket, and promised I'd keep things running no matter what. The next few months turned into a blur of work and worry. I handled vet appointments, intake calls, and adoption fairs, while Harlan faded slowly into memory even before he was gone. The night he passed, the shelter lights flickered from a storm, and for a moment I thought he was still walking through the halls, checking locks like he always did. The next morning, I hung his denim jacket by the office door. "Still got work to do," I whispered, as if he could hear it. June barked once, sharp and certain, like she agreed. The air smelled like wet soil and promise. I picked up a hammer and went back to work. Grief hit me slower this time, not like collapse, but like a tide. It didn't drown. It reshaped. Every fence I fixed, every bowl I filled, every timid dog I coaxed from a corner felt like a prayer set in motion. Volunteers came, offering condolences and casseroles, but what I needed was routine. Harlan had built the bones of this place. I was building its heartbeat. When the mayor visited to announce the town's small grant, she said, "You've made this shelter something bigger than charity. It's a story of second chances." I smiled, though the words landed heavier than she realized. I'd been living a second chance for years, and now I was ready to make it permanent. We named the new wing after Harlan, the Cook Recovery Barn. I painted the letters myself, crooked but proud. During the ribbon cutting, local news cameras swarmed, and I felt the same unease I used to feel in crowds. But this time, there was no stage, no spotlight, no laughter hiding knives. There was just gratitude, quiet, grounded, and shared. June sat by my feet while they clapped. When someone asked what kept me going through loss, I said, "Some things break you so you can build stronger." The crowd went silent, not sure if they should cheer or think. That was fine. I wasn't performing, I was just telling the truth. By fall, the shelter ran smoother than ever. Volunteers managed the books, high school kids handled morning walks, and I found time to breathe again. I even started a community workshop teaching basic carpentry and repairs, skills for kids who needed something to hold on to, like I once did. One of them asked me if I ever wanted revenge on the people who hurt me. I smiled, sanding down a rough edge. Revenge doesn't build anything, I said, but peace does. The boy nodded, maybe understanding, maybe not. Either way, I kept sanding until the wood felt like something worth keeping. The storm rolled in fast, turning the afternoon sky to bruised steel. I was out back stacking lumber when thunder cracked open the valley. Within minutes, rain came sideways, pelting the tin roof like gravel. June barked once, sharp and urgent. I ran toward the kennels, wind ripping my hat off, the sound of chaos rising behind me. A tree had snapped across the main fence line, splintering boards, and freeing 3 dogs who bolted toward the woods. "June, stay!" I shouted, but she ignored me, chasing after them into the storm. My boots sank deep in mud as I ran after her, lightning flashing like the world was warning me to stop. But I didn't stop. I found them by the creek, trapped near the fallen fence. June circled them, barking like a shepherd twice her size. I grabbed the nearest leash, slipping on wet clay, knees cracking hard against stone. By the time I herded them back under the barn awning, my hands were bleeding from splinters. Harlan's old jacket hung on the wall, soaked from leaks above. "Guess it's on me now," I muttered. The storm raged all night, tearing shingles and flooding the lower stalls. By morning, the shelter looked half drowned, but every animal was safe. I stood there in the silence after the storm, breath shaky but proud. Maybe this was what survival looked like, wreckage that refused to quit breathing. The news spread faster than I expected. Someone had filmed part of the rescue from their porch, and the clip found its way online. Local shelter hero saves dozens of dogs in flood. It sounded ridiculous, but it drew people in. Donations poured through the mail slot, messages from strangers thanking me for doing what anyone decent should. A reporter came by for an interview, microphone trembling in the wind. "You've become a bit of a hometown symbol," she said. "What drives you?" I thought of everything I'd lost, every person who'd mistaken my silence for weakness. "I don't save things," I said. "I just give them another chance to stand." The quote ended up everywhere. Within weeks, volunteers doubled, and the county offered a partnership. The mayor called it a model for rural rescue innovation. I called it good timing and hard work. They invited me to speak at a regional conference in Nashville about rebuilding from loss. The invitation sat on my desk for 3 days before I touched it. Public speaking had always felt like exposure, like reopening wounds. But Harlan's handwriting stared back from the wall calendar. "Don't hide from what you've already survived." So I packed my suit, brushed June, and drove through the night. The conference hall smelled of coffee, lights, and nerves. When my name was called, I took the stage with hands that didn't shake. I told them the truth, not a polished story, not something built for applause. I spoke about the storm, about Harlan, about the nights I almost didn't make it. "You don't fix what's broken by pretending it never cracked," I said. "You fix it by learning how to hold it differently." People went quiet in that kind of way that means they're really listening. When I stepped off stage, a woman stopped me, tears in her eyes. "My brother and I haven't spoken in years," she said. "I think I'll call him tonight." I nodded, understanding too well. On the drive home, I realized something had shifted. My story wasn't just mine anymore. It belonged to anyone who needed proof that healing still counts as victory. Back home, the shelter's mailbox overflowed with letters, handwritten ones. Kids from schools drew pictures of dogs under rainbows. Retired vets sent small checks with shaky signatures. One letter stood out, though. The handwriting was familiar, confident, curved. It read, "Proud of you, Eli. Never said it before, but I mean it now. Caleb." I stared at it for a long time. My chest tightened, not with anger, but something heavier, understanding. I didn't reply, not yet. Some bridges can't be rebuilt with ink alone. Still, I pinned the letter beside the shelter's mission sign. It felt right there, like part of the foundation instead of the wound. Weeks later, a man from a national foundation visited the shelter. He offered a grant to expand, big enough to turn our small-town operation into a regional center. "You'll need leadership," he said. "People trust you." I almost laughed, remembering how little I used to trust myself. But then I thought of Harlan, of the storm, of June's determined bark. "We'll take it," I said. The paperwork was a mountain, but I climbed it. We bought new land by the river and began building the next phase. Watching volunteers raise beams under a clean autumn sky, I felt something pure, the kind of pride that doesn't depend on anyone's approval. That night, as the last truck left, I sat on the half-built steps of the new shelter. The air smelled of sawdust and damp soil. June curled at my feet, her nose twitching at the distant sound of coyotes. I pulled the letter from my pocket again, reading Caleb's words under the fading light. For the first time, I whispered his name without bitterness. The old ache didn't vanish, but it softened, like scars under calloused hands. Maybe forgiveness wasn't a door you opened, it was a weight you decided to stop carrying. Either way, I knew it was coming, the reunion, and this time, I wouldn't be the one shrinking. Autumn brought a calm that didn't feel accidental. The hills around town were dusted with gold, the air crisp with wood smoke and promise. I'd just finished painting the new sign, Cook Warner Rescue Center, when my phone buzzed with a message from my mother. Family dinner Sunday, your father's retirement party, please come. I stared at it for a long time. 3 years since I'd seen Caleb in person. 3 years since I'd watched him take what I thought was mine. The thought of walking back into that house made my stomach tighten, but this time, I wasn't the same man. I wasn't the one who'd left that diner with a hollow chest. I was someone who built life from the ashes they gave me. Sunday came too bright, too still. I wore my only clean button-up, brushed the dust from my boots, and drove into town. The Warner house looked smaller than memory made it, but maybe I was just standing taller now. Cars lined the driveway, the yard filled with laughter that used to feel like belonging. I walked up the porch steps slow, June at my heel, tail wagging like she'd already forgiven everyone. Mom opened the door, tears already shining. "Eli," she breathed, hugging me tight enough to crack the years between us. "It's been too long." "It has," I said. "You look good." She smiled like she'd been waiting to hear that. "He's here," she whispered. "Your brother." Caleb stood near the fireplace, holding a glass, mid-conversation. He looked older, lines near his eyes, a little less shine in his smile. When he saw me, the whole room seemed to pause, like someone had hit mute on the night. "Eli," he said, voice low, cautious. "Didn't think you'd come." "Neither did I said. Dad clapped me on the back, proud and awkward all at once. "Heard about your place," he said. "You made something real." "Tried to," I said, and he nodded. Around us, people murmured, shifting the air with curiosity. Caleb raised his glass slightly, toasting the space between us. "To new beginnings," he said. I raised nothing, just nodded once. Dinner was a theater of small talk. Mom bragged about her boys, careful not to tilt the scales. "Both of them making names for themselves," she said, as if our paths had been parallel, not intersecting in fire. Lucy wasn't there. Her absence felt deliberate, clean, like an old chapter finally closing. I focused on the meal, fork to plate, chew, swallow, breathe. Across the table, Caleb watched me like a man trying to solve a riddle written in a language he'd once known. After dessert, he stood, motioned toward the porch. "Got a minute?" he asked. I followed him outside, the air cold enough to sting. We stood under the porch light, moths circling like restless ghosts. "You've done well," he said. His tone carried no sarcasm, just weariness. "You too," I replied. He laughed once, bitterly. "Not really. Lucy left a year ago. Said she was tired of pretending." I said nothing. "Turns out, taking what isn't yours doesn't make it fit better," he continued. "You'd think I'd have known that." I leaned on the railing, watching the light stretch across the yard. "People learn late sometimes," I said. "If they're lucky." He nodded, eyes glossy. "I was jealous, you know. Always was. You didn't care about crowds or attention. People liked you for the right reasons." His voice cracked, and I couldn't stand that. The silence after that wasn't heavy. It was necessary. He wiped his eyes quickly, embarrassed by his own honesty. "You deserved her, Eli," he said. "Not me. I knew it then, but I wanted to win." I stared at the night sky, the stars sharp and distant. "You didn't win," I said softly. "You just got there first." He swallowed hard, then laughed through it. "Yeah, that's one way to put it." I turned to face him. "You ever think about what it cost you?" "Every day," he said. "That's why I reached out. I wanted you to know I finally understand." I nodded slowly. "Understanding's a start," I said, "but it's not a finish line." He nodded again, tears slipping before he could stop them. "I don't expect forgiveness," he said. "I just needed to say it." I let the words hang in the cold for a while. "Then you've said it," I replied. "That's enough for tonight." He looked at me like he wanted to hug me, but he didn't. Instead, he whispered, "You really did build something beautiful, you know." I smiled, small but real. "You helped," I said, "just not the way you think." He laughed quietly, shaking his head. "Fair enough. We stood there until the porch light flickered out, the past finally losing its audience. Inside, the music started again, and Mom called for another toast. Caleb wiped his face, straightened his collar, and said, "You coming in?" "In a minute," I said. He nodded and went inside, leaving me with the night. June rested her head against my leg, her breath steady and warm. I looked out at the quiet street, the same one I used to escape down years ago. It didn't look like a wound anymore. It looked like a map, one I'd finally learned to read. I took a deep breath, pocketed my pride, and walked back inside to rejoin the noise, not as the broken brother, but as the man who'd learned how to stand. The next morning, my phone buzzed with a text from Caleb. "Can I come by? I owe you a real talk." I stared at it for a long minute, thumb hovering. The old version of me, the one who hid behind anger, would have ignored it, but the man I'd become believed in closure, not avoidance. "Sure," I typed back. "The shelter's open. Come anytime after noon." I didn't tell the volunteers or prepare any speeches. I just worked the morning as usual, sweeping feed, checking gates, patching fences. June watched me from her usual spot by the porch, sensing something shifting in the air. By the time Caleb's truck pulled into the gravel lot, the wind had gone still, like the day itself was holding its breath. He stepped out wearing jeans and a jacket that didn't fit as sharp as it used to. The confident swagger I'd grown up resenting was gone. He walked slower, shoulders heavy, eyes searching the ground before they found mine. "Place looks incredible," he said quietly. "Harlan would have been proud." I nodded, unsure how to start. "He was the one who believed I'd figure it out," I said. Caleb looked around, hands in his pockets, taking in the kennels, the volunteers laughing near the barn, the calm hum of the workday. "You did more than figure it out," he said. "You built something people need." He paused, then added, "I came to say what I should have years ago." He motioned toward a bench near the oak tree, and we sat, the air thick with old ghosts. "I told Lucy things about you that weren't true," he said. "Said you weren't ready for a family, that you were too simple, too content with small dreams." His voice cracked halfway through. "I said it because I was afraid she'd pick you, and she would have." The honesty hit harder than anger ever did. "I already knew," I said. "Not the details, but I felt it." He nodded, eyes wet. "I've spent years convincing myself I won, when really I just stole something I didn't understand. I watched a leaf fall between us, curling into the dirt like punctuation. Winning and keeping are two different things," I said. He looked at his hands, fingers trembling like someone out of practice with humility. "I thought success would make it easier to forget what I did," he said. "But every deal, every party, every photo, it just felt like noise. And every time your name came up, I felt smaller." He laughed bitterly. "You built a life without needing anyone's permission. I spent mine pretending I didn't need your forgiveness." I leaned back, arms crossed loosely. "You don't need to pretend anymore," I said. "But you also don't need to be forgiven to change." He looked at me, startled by the gentleness in my tone. "You're not angry?" "Not anymore," I said. "I carried that anger like armor. Turns out peace fits better." We sat in silence for a long while, listening to the dogs bark faintly in the distance. Caleb took a deep breath, steady but broken. "I saw Lucy last week," he said. "She asked about you." My chest tightened, but I didn't look away. "What did you tell her?" "That you finally found what we were both searching for," he said. "Joy that doesn't depend on someone else." I smiled faintly, not from pride, but from understanding. "Then you told her the truth," I said. He nodded. "She said you'd probably forgive me before I deserved it." I chuckled softly. "She always was too optimistic." He laughed too, the sound dry and human, stripped of charm, finally honest. He stood after a while, wiping his eyes with his sleeve. "I don't expect to fix this," he said, "but if you ever need a hand here, volunteering, building, anything, I'd like to help." I studied his face, the brother who'd once taken my world apart now asking to carry a piece of mine. "You're welcome any time," I said. "We don't turn away strays." That made him laugh, just enough to break the last of the tension. "Guess that makes me your newest rescue," he said. "No," I replied. "You just needed a place to remember who you were before the noise." He nodded slowly, eyes glinting with something like relief. When he left, I stood there for a long time, the sound of his truck fading down the gravel road. The sky had gone pale and soft, clouds stretched thin like forgiveness written across distance. June trotted up, pressing her head against my knee. I knelt down, running my hand over her fur. "We did it, girl," I whispered. "We survived the fire without burning anyone back." She wagged her tail, content as ever, as if to say survival itself was enough. Inside the office, Caleb's letter still hung pinned to the wall. It no longer looked like guilt, it looked like closure framed by grace. That evening, as the sun sank low over the new wing, I realized peace doesn't arrive loud or sudden. It comes like dusk, slow, certain, and earned. I thought about how revenge had once seemed like justice, how forgiveness felt too soft to protect anything. But in the end, forgiveness wasn't surrender. It was reclamation. It gave me back the parts of myself that hate had buried. As I locked the gate, I whispered to the quiet, "It's over." And for the first time, I truly meant it. Winter came with the kind of cold that wakes memories you thought had settled. Frost laced the shelter's fence, glimmering like quiet applause in the morning light. The year had ended softer than it began. The new barn stood tall now, clean lines against the skyline, painted the same deep blue as Harlan's old truck. Volunteers still called me boss, though I never used the word myself. I didn't feel like one. I felt more like a caretaker, of animals, of people, of my own hard-won calm. Caleb came by sometimes, helping with repairs or hauling feed, never asking for anything more than conversation. We didn't talk about the past anymore. That part had been folded away, like a letter read enough times to finally lose its sting. The shelter had grown in ways I never expected. School groups visited, local businesses sponsored adoption days. Even the county fair asked us to set up a booth. Folks wanted to hear about the quiet man who built something from nothing. I'd smile, tell them it wasn't nothing. It was pain repurposed into work that mattered. They'd nod, half understanding, then pet June or drop a donation in the box. What I didn't tell them was that every success came with a whisper of guilt. Sometimes I'd think about the version of me who stood in that diner years ago, holding a ring he never got to give. He'd look at me now and wonder how I learned to smile again. The answer was simple, but it took years to earn. Joy doesn't find you. You build it nail by nail, truth by truth. One afternoon, Lucy showed up. I saw her from across the lot before she saw me. Same brown hair, a little shorter, eyes that once made promises they couldn't keep. She walked slow, like someone approaching holy ground. "Eli," she said softly, almost a question. I wiped my hands on my jeans, unsure if I was ready for this ghost. "Lucy," I said, "you visiting or adopting?" She smiled faintly. "Maybe both." We stood there for a moment, the air thick with everything we didn't say. "You've done well," she said, glancing at the barns, the kennels, the volunteers, laughing in the distance. "I read about you. You turned pain into something beautiful." "I just kept busy," I said. "Sometimes that's enough." She nodded, eyes glossy. "Caleb told me you forgave him," she said. I shrugged. "I stopped carrying him, if that's what you mean." "He's doing better now," she said. "Different, quieter." I smiled faintly. "Then maybe we both found what we needed." She hesitated, biting her lip the way she used to when words scared her. "I wanted to say I'm sorry," she whispered, "for not seeing you, for believing him, for letting you disappear when you should have been fought for." Her voice cracked on the last word. I looked at her and felt the ache rise, old but strangely gentle now. "I'm glad you came," I said. "You didn't have to." "Maybe I did," she said, eyes shining. "You deserve to hear it." We walked the property together for a while, stopping by the new runs. June followed close, tail wagging like she knew the importance of the moment. "She's beautiful," Lucy said, kneeling to scratch June's head. "She found me when I needed saving," I said. "Seems to be a pattern around here." Lucy smiled through tears. "You were always better at saving than taking." "I had to learn the hard way," I said. When she stood, her hand brushed mine. It didn't linger. It didn't have to. "You ever think about what could have been?" she asked quietly. I looked toward the barn, the sunlight cutting through the doorway like mercy. "Sometimes," I said, "but I think what has turned out stronger than what could have been." She nodded, wiping her eyes. "You built peace," she said. "Most people never find that." "It's not something you find," I said. "It's something you keep choosing." She smiled one last time, then whispered, "You were the home I wasn't brave enough to stay in." The words hit deep, not as pain, but as closure. I watched her walk away, hair catching the afternoon light, fading into the horizon she once stole from me. I didn't chase her this time. Some things aren't meant to return. They're meant to remind you how far you've come. That evening, the volunteers threw a small gathering for the shelter's anniversary. There was cider, laughter, and a quiet toast in Harlan's honor. Caleb showed up halfway through, carrying a load of feed like penance disguised as help. He joined us at the fire, sitting beside me in silence. "She came by," I said. He nodded. "She called me after, said you were kind." "Didn't feel like kindness," I said. "Just the truth." He smiled faintly. "Sometimes that's the kindest thing we've got." We watched sparks rise into the cold night, our breath turning to smoke. There was no need to say more. For once, the silence between us felt earned. Later, when everyone left, I stayed by the fire until it burned to embers. June curled beside me, her head heavy on my boot. The stars spread across the sky, endless and calm. I thought about every step it took to get here. The betrayal, the loneliness, the rebuilding. Every chapter had carved something out of me, but what remained was solid, simple, unshakable. I wasn't the brother who'd lost. I was the man who'd built something that lasted. The world didn't owe me an apology, and I didn't owe it bitterness. All I owed was honesty, to myself, to the people who stayed, and to the quiet joy I'd made from ruin. As the last flame died, I whispered a prayer that wasn't really words, more like gratitude stretched into breath. I thought about how every scar, every wrong turn, every goodbye had been part of the construction. Pain had been my blueprint, patience my foundation, peace my final structure. The night answered with the soft rhythm of crickets and the wind moving gently through the fences. I smiled, feeling light enough to finally let the past rest. If this story found you when you needed it, share it with someone who's still trying to build their peace from broken pieces. And tell me, if the person who stole your chance at happiness came to you years later seeking forgiveness, would you open the door or let your silence guard the joy you built alone?